Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. For those of you who haven't been to the AGBI, we are the AGBI here. So we've been in this building for the last 2 years, just over, moving in September of 2022. But the AGBI has been around since 1814 with the same mission to support professional visual artists who are unable to work due to injury or illness. So we're continuing that work, giving grants to artists in need, while also now having this wonderful exhibition space, inviting artists like Laura in to show their work and share with their network what it is that we do. So that's the kind of mission of why we do exhibitions here, get people in the door, connect with other artists, and talk about what it is that we do and why we do it. So Laura Ford, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This sculpture in the middle of the room is Laura's fabulous work, and we're really excited and grateful to have it here in this space for the Material Matters exhibition. Material Matters is really a show about the materials and the materiality of works and the different types of materials that artists use in their practice. But it also represents the variety of artists that we help and support with our grants. So we help artists regardless of what materials they use. So with that, I'm just going to get started with asking some questions. So this exhibition, as I mentioned, is about materials, and you use a very wide range of materials in your work. So I wondered if you could just kind of explain your relationship to the materials that you use in your practice and how that communicates a little bit with the works.
Well, I would love to say that I'm sort of led by materials, but I'm not always. There's not a sort of totally one way of working that I have. So it might be led by an idea, and then I'll find the material that's right for that idea. And sometimes I'll go through different processes until I find it. And sometimes I'll just see a piece of fabric and think it'll conjure something up. It'll conjure an idea up because it'll remind me of something. So, so in that way, then it will come from the material. But for me, being able to make in lots of different ways is very important because of the connotations that each material brings with it. And so, it gives me a bigger language, I guess.
Do you have a preference for the machine? Do you always?
No, I think it goes through phases at the moment. It's clay and fabric at the moment. So I'm doing lots of ceramics at the moment.
That's exciting.
Which is very enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's winter.
Yeah.
Energy is low. I'm making lots of. Well, it also the work goes in phases. So at the moment, I'm making what you might call as maquettes. So ideas for bigger pieces, but they're also ornaments as well. I don't really like to think of them as just ceramic. I like to think of them as ornaments, things you can put on shelves and have little fantasies about, really.
Tell little stories of their own.
Tell little stories,
That's lovely.
of your own and my own.
Yeah. So this piece that we have in the exhibition is seemingly very relevant for what's happening in the world today. So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about the space that you were in and what you were thinking about when you were making this piece in particular.
Well, nothing to do with the events of today. It was probably to do with, at the time, having elderly parents and having to look after me and my partner, having to look after elderly parents. And also getting that sense of, well, once they're gone, it's me. So getting a sense of feeling old, starting to feel old, and starting to notice how they were going to a sort of mindset of feeling useless. So actually this piece started out just with her, and she was I wanted her to be a draft excluder. So it was quite a mean piece of work, really.
Yeah.
It was
Well, you have that dark humour.
So she was a draft excluder. She was. Yes, yeah. So useless. I might as well be here excluding the draft, and so getting a sense of what old age might start to feel like, and then it turned into me and Andrew sort of structuring, looking after, being these sort of heroic, shaggy, exhausted lions, I suppose.
Yeah.
So they're always quite personal.
Yeah.
Really, the works. But then I'm also really glad that it does have that resonance for today. And of course, you do see endless photographs of people picking up their loved ones in sheets, and and it's completely heartbreaking. And it's actually the same sort of emotional intensity as well.
Yeah.
Of care, of sort of urgency.
Yeah. That personal element often has a universal, everyone can relate to it, the work.
Yeah.
It just makes it really powerful, and we get a lot of people coming in and saying, wow, look at that, and they relate very much to to either the people on the stretcher or the people carrying it.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to have those conversations in this space.
But I've been thinking more and more lately is how do you get to? I've been a little bit low on energy. I'm thinking, how did I just decide to make that for nothing? Knew it would never get sold, or might get shown once or twice and then go into storage, and you just kind of think, what is my problem? What is this need, this urge to make this, yet another thing in the world?
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from? You have no idea.
So it's a need to see it.
Yeah.
I know where it comes from.
What is that?
Life's not enough.
Life's not enough. You're absolutely right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes. It's really painful, that,
isn't it? We often come across artists who are emerging, or who might not have sold for a while, or are still grinding and trying to make it work. So is there one pivotal moment in your career as an artist that's shaped your success or your practice to be what it is today?
Not really. I'm always emerging, apparently.
Yeah.
It's like, there were quite critical things. So while I was on my MA at Chelsea, I got put in this massive sculpture survey show, which was the Hayward and the Serpentine galleries. And I think I was 21, and I had no idea how important it was. I think at the private view, I could see various artists networking away, and I was there with my radical feminist texts, sort of spitting and not knowing how to be in that world at all.
Yeah.
But that was slightly put me on the map, and then I suppose, a few other kind of shows. But I think Venice as well, representing Wales in Venice. But not only was that a great thing to do, it was like a fantastic experience. The curator was fabulous, as we say in Swansea, and the other artists. So it was just, the whole thing was just brilliant. It was a really thrilling thing to do.
Yeah. Is there a lesson that you've taken away from those experiences of how to interact with the art world?
There was one point where, so you get to show at a certain time, you think, oh, well, I must go on to greater and greater things. But of course, it never works out like that. There are peaks and troughs. And for me, I always think, well, don't ever turn down a gig, because you never know what will come out of it. And it's not just what will come out of it, sales or another show or whatever. It's making connections. It's having the opportunity to just see your work somewhere else, and keep everything going.
Yeah. On that note, I didn't write this down and send it to you earlier, but I have another question.
Yeah.
So we support artists here, and we often hear stories of who has supported them in their career or building their practice. Is there someone influential in your life who...
Well, there's a load of filthy old bankers who are absolutely brilliant, who've just been incredible at supporting me and became good friends. But also there are certain people that get a little bit addicted to your work. So they start off with one or two, and then they buy another one, and then you think, oh, that must be it. And then they buy another one. You think, well, that must be it now.
Yeah.
And then they
just keep
still
going.
thinking about another one. You just think, blimey, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's really special.
Yeah, it's very special. There have been, a few of those, thank God.
Yeah.
There was, right at the beginning, there was this guy called Charles Levison, who's sadly died now, but he worked as a lawyer for Virgin Records. And he was amazing. Every time I was down to my last 10 pence, I'd get on the phone and call Charles, and he'd come with his Coots checkbook, and he'd usually buy something.
That's lovely.
And then he kind of stopped at some point. But yeah,
that's
kept me
nice.
going.
That's really nice. So you are now still the president of the Royal Society of Sculptors, which puts you in a position where you support other artists in many different ways. And the AGBI, with our steward program, I believe you were our steward last year.
Yeah.
So you were sending out letters asking for donations, but also asking people in your network if they needed help.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that experience. And
well, I just did it mainly through the Royal Society, so just making sure that everyone knew about it. And well, I think people are always amazed because they don't really know that these things still exist, that people still do them, and it's a fantastic. I think not only is it a fantastic safety net in terms of some money, it's just somebody out there that cares, because you are quite alone as an artist, and I think your whole life is full of risk, and when you get ill, or if there's other problems, your children are sick or your family's sick, where's that safety net? I mean, I don't have a pension or anything like that. You live at risk most of your life.
Yeah, I think you've also answered my next question about why you think the AGBI is relevant in the contemporary art world.
Yeah, it's I think it's also getting it's knowing that you can't as well, because I think when you're ill and you're vulnerable, you can probably feel like you've disappeared and there's nobody in the world that will help you. So it's good that there are people.
Yeah, it's really lovely when we have our council members sit around the table and then we're able to offer an artist money, and they say, just being recognised by the people in your council, it's really special. It always gives a little bit of an ego boost, a little bit of a boost
it's
for confidence.
more being part of a community. I think.
Yeah.
Because it's quite often difficult to see that you are, because you're working alone a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's very nice.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to open up to questions from the audience, if anyone has any questions.
Oh, because I whipped through those.
You really did. You really did.
So interesting. So interesting. Laura, sorry, you asked. No. Please go ahead. Sure, yes.
You say you don't know why you made this, but obviously you were going through something with Andrew.
Yeah.
So which is really tough.
Yeah.
To put it in a bland statement, but if you hadn't made this, what would you have done to deal with what you were going through? So not to say it's cathartic.
Yeah.
It's and you said it's another thing in the world. You're very conscious of creating something that maybe wasn't asked to be made by anyone else.
Yeah.
But you have made it. Is it cathartic? Has it been a process? Has it been any?
Yeah, it is cathartic. Yeah, I think it is. And it's funny because I think there was a period in the art world where that was really frowned upon. You know, this idea that it had some kind of therapy value or something.
Yeah.
But of course it isn't that, because as soon as you've made it, it becomes something else, and it exists in the world, and it's open to interpretation and everything else.
Well, that's the
it
thing. So
moves
people
on.
walking past this, as you were saying, there's that association possibly with what's happening right now, which, as you say, actually it's to do with aging people, your own mortality. But so that is, it's just fascinating to me, because people may read into it something entirely different, and you're totally open.
Well, it is, because it's, at the end of the day, it is about mortality, and it's about kind of emergency and caring and that kind of thing.
But they are in total perpetual motion, like they are not at all static, the lines.
Yeah.
And that sort of, I can just imagine them carrying on that lean.
Yes.
Forever and ever and ever.
Definitely. And I wanted the figures to be in a bit sort of stereotype old people, you know, like Italian peasants or something as well. So it's got a kind of slight comic
or Charlie's
thing to it.
Factory with the grandparents.
Yes,
that
yes,
feeling of
exactly.
only existing as a pair.
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah, yeah.
The way that the parents are depicted, they're very much like soft toys. Is that something to do with aging and regression to childhood?
It is. Well, as I said, it came from that door excluder. So. Well, it is. It is.
Excluders to toys is quite a.
Yeah, and they're soft, aren't they? They're soft, lovable, floppy, useless. I suppose so. They are quite they're toy-like in that they're probably
The face.
stereotypes, aren't they? Yeah.
It's like a sort of Dickensian story.
Yeah, he's a granddad. If you were.
But it's a beautiful way of describing the difference between being totally alive and struggling to keep going, excuse me, carry all that weight.
Yeah.
And that moment of aging when personality is almost lost.
Yes, and it isn't, but
It
as
isn't,
well, because
it
it's.
isn't, but the great fear from the older person.
But also the fear from the old person, but also the person that's starting to look after them. They're just like, oh shit, this is my future, and I'm going to be invisible. People are going to think I'm a daffy old bat, you know.
If they don't appear injured or in pain, there's a giving in and a relinquishing to the lying down.
Yeah.
If I can, that's my reading.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, oh, well, sod it then. I'll just lie here and you can carry me.
Yes. Well, at some point, that's what happens with parents.
Well, they're sort of comforted, aren't they, by the two poor buggers that have to carry. That's comforting.
Yeah.
Just to sort of give up and let someone else take care of stuff.
Yeah.
I've been through it as well.
I think that's the thing, that we're telling a story that we can all read our story.
Yeah.
The beauty of sculpture or painting is that it leaves room for your own story. It's lovely to hear your story. I'd filled it up with my story, but to hear your story.
Well, I find that so interesting, that narrative thing, because again, for a long time, it was really deeply unfashionable to do anything narrative. But it was like as though you had a fixed story, and nothing is fixed. The minute we open our mouths, we can start talking about our experience, but it's your interpretation of what I've said about my experience. And also, I think my experience is one thing, but the way I'm telling you is another thing as well. So it's so kind of.
But you've also left room for that terrible puzzle. You're going through this part of life which we all reluctantly go through.
Yeah.
And it's tragic, and it's very upsetting, and it's a big kick in the bum to make sure you're living every minute of your life. But you're going through a situation like this, you feel differently So there isn't even one story to tell about one sculpture. It's containing how you felt in all those different ways while you're making it. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's one of the sculptures that I've been looking at and feeling more and more towards. It's beautiful how you draw in, particularly the hand on this side. Feeling a grip on that ruddy stretcher. There are little moments like that all over the sculpture, which is just delightful.
Oh, that's good. Because that's quite important. Those things. So it might look throwaway at times, but
the weight of the legs and the little touches. It's
good. Well, I'm glad I made it then.
And you don't need a reason to make sculpture. It's a thing with artists. Nobody asks us to do it. Nobody asks us to spend all our money on studios and materials and huge things that nobody wants. Nobody asks us to do it. We're doing it anyway. But you must do it. I thought Steve's saying because life is not enough. It's heartbreakingly true. I've never heard anyone say that before. It's just, it was like a bit of a punch. It's so obvious. Once you it's obvious. But,
Could you say something about the length of the structure, because it's making Grandad here really uncomfortable.
Squished up.
From the groin down. Maybe because I'm a bloke. The stretcher. I presume the stretcher was meant to be this length. Did the stretcher come before Grandad, or was Grandad first?
No, I think I always do everything all at the same time.
Right.
I always wanted it to be short because people get shorter.
Right.
But I also wanted it to, like, my middle son has just had an operation on his ACL, and so everything is really uncomfortable getting in the car, and so I wanted that sort of crumpled up. It's not particularly comfortable feeling.
No, it's not.
But he's blissed out. He's not bothered about this.
I think I think he's awkward. I think it's not comfortable, but he's having to.
But it'd be fascinating if you were to take a sort of look at people on the street walking by like they are now and their own take. If we're walking into a museum or walking into a gallery, we will maybe read something very differently to something that is in such a space and open to somebody through osmosis or through walking. I would be fascinated to read the comments of people during a day and just like through the corner of their eye noticing this, what their reaction would be. I think that could be quite an interesting experiment.
Absolutely.
Do you get comments?
It's different, isn't it? It's a different experience.
It is. We get all different types of comments and people pushing their faces against the glass. Children stopping and being like, what is that? And every member of society that walks past here, you capture their eye and they're always looking at this one, and it just draws them in. Had a couple of conversations with people, and they come in and they say, "What is that? That's amazing," and that's it. And they don't really want to know what I have to say about it because they want to just walk around and they're hit by their emotions because of it. But we've had people ask, "What does it mean? What is this about?" We've had people saying, "Oh, they look really tired. That looks cozy. I would love to get on there." We've had some children be a little bit scared of the lions. Some kids come in and they're fascinated. We've had all different types of stories to do with this piece. So,
but
it really is.
It's different. It's encountering something through a window. You haven't decided to go to a museum.
Yeah.
And think about the piece of work and try and understand it.
Yeah.
I
think when you're confronted,
you're
confronted by it through this glass, and it disrupts people's day.
Yeah.
In a wonderful way. So it's fantastic to have it here. and to have people interact so freely with it. Yeah. Any
Can
other?
I just ask, I mean, the material that the stretcher bearers are made from, it's a very particular kind of bag of some kind. What
It's
was in
a
the
coffee bag.
Coffee bag.
Yeah. I suppose I was thinking, you know, sackcloth and feeling sort of.
Does coffee enter the narrative?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It's that hardy material, though. Like
Yeah,
you have to be hardier.
Hardy,
than
and
the people.
it's free, isn't it?
Mm.
It's you can find it.
Yeah, the strength of that material as opposed to the softness of the materials used in the figures on the stretcher is really lovely. Tension there.
It's like elements of sackcloth and ashes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yourself up.
I did go to a convent, yes. Definitely.
Are there any other questions?
I'd like to know about. I went to there was a members an RSS members exhibition that I went to recently in Woolwich, and the title of the exhibition was
Something about materials, wasn't it?
Unmonumental.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had a catalogue from that from 2007, and in the Brooklyn Museum, and I kind of let off a bomb.
Did you?
With the first question that anyone answered.
What was that?
Asked rather. Well, everything was made. This isn't apropos of your materials.
Yeah.
But it's just making me think of it. I don't think this belongs to that kind of anti-monumental type of work I'm looking at. But anyway, but everything in there looked as if it was about to. There was no real way of conserving it. Because it was kind of materials that were going to, destined to be skipped in a few years' time, and that was their modus operandi.
Yeah.
And there was quite a lot of hot air about unmonumentality. So I just asked the question, if all of this ephemeral work is going to disappear into a skip in a few months, what are generations in the future going to enjoy? What are we going to look at? And, it really kicked off.
Oh really? What was said?
Well, let's just say I didn't stay behind when the talk was over.
Okay.
I got a lot of dirty looks. But I thought it was a genuine question.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not a question I would ask of you, but I just wonder if when you're conceiving a piece of work, whether, because it's called Material Matters, does conservation or being able to sell something, does it come into your thinking at all?
Well, it does, because I'm somebody who likes stuff. If I had extra cash, I would definitely buy things. I like having them, and I would like to live with certain paintings or certain.
Right.
And so actually early on in making, I would think, well, what's not in the world that I would like to have? It was almost like something I wanted.
And resolved into an artwork.
Yeah. So I would make it. And right. But in terms of the making thing, it's quite difficult, the ephemeral thing, because I've got such intent for things. So I do want those hands to feel like that. And if things are ephemeral, like I have gone back and seen works that maybe I might have had the jumper like that, and it's risen up a bit, and I've lost, and then it loses all emotional content for me, all emotional power. So now I make sure that actually I really, really make things so that
It won't change.
so that they don't change.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still hold that. Yeah, but
So let's take that a little bit further in terms of, like, let's say this is bought by a museum. Let's say in 60 years' time there's an exhibition on those lines or something more historic, and this has had some insects have a go at it, and the Conservatives were going to replace it with coffee. Would you be happy with that?
well, actually, if insects had a go at it, it might look better in a funny way. I think it would depend on the work. You know, some works are kind of more pristine and beautifully made, and I would think yes, you know, remake it. That's fine. But something like this, it might just get better.
Yeah.
But eventually it wouldn't.
Yes.
It's moth infested.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'd look after it. But yeah.
If they fumigate it.
Yeah.
Could you export that into Australia as it is? Or do you have to have it treated?
I don't know.
Some artworks have to be treated before
I'm
go
sure they
into
do. Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
They used to treat passengers on the plane.
Oh,
If
well,
you need to, you can freeze it.
yeah.
There's a technique of, but it is below freezing. I can't remember the exact temperature.
Minus.
It kills any life.
Well, the Tate
That's the idea. That's the idea. And
That would be
Yeah.
Fitting.
I find it incredibly. It's a release. It's a relief. It's fabulous using friable materials because you don't have the responsibility of it necessarily being there. I mean, you know, Rembrandts were painted with all sorts of stuff that hasn't lasted, and I noticed a Barry Flanagan stitched together.
Oh, yeah.
Piece of the tape was brought out
Yeah.
recently. You can conserve them. They don't fall
Yeah.
apart
Yeah.
by themselves.
But it shouldn't be your first concern, that's
Exactly.
for sure, because it inhibits
Yeah.
your.
It's
your
actually
ideas,
a huge relief to be making
I
something
mean, even the
that exists in its
idea
own-
that it might be shown inhibits
Yes.
making as well,
Yeah.
because you start making plinth for it, sort of tidy it up before you've even started. Yeah,
That's what kills me.
yeah.
Terrible idea.
But sometimes you can finish it before you've even started it. You haven't really lived through the work or made it.
The reason I mention it is partly to do with that because this material is really abject,
Yeah,
and the psychological condition that you're describing. I mean, the material is like a metaphor. The material itself is like a metaphor for the abject part of the life that most sons and daughters have to live through. Somewhat. The material itself, and the sort of
yeah,
it's like the opposite end of bronze, isn't it?
yeah, which I love using as well.
It's abject. It's interesting that the material itself and the subject matter are beautifully
Yeah, it's funny.
hybridized.
I had a conversation with somebody this morning who wanted some advice. He was setting up a workshop for artists, and you know, what do artists need, and think about the Royal Society of Sculptors and about how art schools have all become fine art, and as a result of becoming fine art, they've lost their spaces for sculpture because the sculptors are the greediest people for space, and the neediest people for space, and now, you know, so many artists, they're learning in a situation where they're hot desking. I don't know how you can hot desk and make sculpture and learn skills, because it's not just learning them in a workshop, it's it's really playing with the stuff and learning how to use the various different languages. So I think there was a period during the end of the 90s or something when you weren't supposed to make your own. It was embarrassing to make your own work as well. Do you remember that? It's like
Never afford.
But to have a studio and to make your own work, that was just like, that was so embarrassing. It's all back in fashion again now. but I think, learning to use the language of sculpture is, I think, really important.
This might not be relevant, but it's an anecdote that I'd like to share. And it's to do with art being therapeutic. I remember going to a lecture for pop artists at the Royal Academy, and Jeff Koons was on stage being interviewed by someone. And he's quite messianic, and he said that artists should not be thinking about art as being therapeutic, because that's like masturbation. And a female friend of mine was sitting behind me, and she shouted, and we're in a big auditorium with like 200 people, she shouted, "What's wrong with masturbation?" And Jeff Koons was just absolutely floored. It was brilliant. Everyone was laughing, and it just showed him up to the twerk.
I saw him give a talk at the V&A, and it was one of the hottest days that have ever been in the summer.
Right.
It was so hot in the V&A auditorium that they were having to hand out bottles of water, and people were quite literally collapsing in their seats. And
That's
Jeff
even before he
Koons-
started talking.
No, but while he was talking, Jeff Koons was wearing a three-piece suit, completely buttoned up, shirt tie, not a bead of sweat anywhere on that man. I'm convinced he's a bot. I went into that lecture totally unable to make my mind up as to whether he's absolutely incredible or a complete charlatan. I'm going to that lecture, I'm going to listen to him, and I left the lecture no clearer. and still have no
It's
idea to this day.
probably a bit of both.
The major difference is the extraordinary financial element. You know, most of us cobble things together as we go, as we can. But if you were Jeff Koons, this could be in bronze, and it could be absolutely texturally in colour, it's exactly as it is now. There are people who can make that happen.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just the cost of a couple of houses.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something magical that happens when you're fighting to say what you have to say with the pitiful stuff that you've got. And you know, using this sacking is absolutely genius because it actually extends the story.
Yeah.
It's not compromising in any way. It's become the story, part of the story. It's wonderful.
Well, I think that's what's exciting about sculpture, isn't it? Because you're using other stuff which exists in the world, and that,
Marcel Duchamp, we owe a lot to him, don't we?
we sort of do, but I sort of, but he does rely on the idea a lot, doesn't he? It doesn't progress that much. It stops.
That's kind of
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just the idea, and Picasso with his newspapers, he and Picasso, introduced the whole world of materials to whole art rather than marble and bronze.
Yeah.
I mean, that's major.
Yeah.
Colour art, French Schwitters just opened the door.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So we owe a lot to them because you can make art from, without a foundry and Jeff Koons' money.
But if this, you're sort of implying that this could exist in bronze.
Absolutely.
But which I think is really fascinating, because for me, let's say you were like, right, I'm going to make it in bronze, edition 3, 2 APs.
I wouldn't add anything to it. It would only detract.
Yeah.
That's
This is
what I was going to say,
magical
is
because
how
we're
would that
aware.
enhance it?
It's here in the moment.
I mean, unless you think,
Yeah.
All
well,
it does is open up the market.
Except sometimes you can do something else with bronze. You can make it quite. So I did a series of rag and bone figures that were like that. So they were Beatrix Potter animals as homeless people going through the bin or having a pram. And so I made them like this, and then they got cast into bronze. So the bronze actually then did something else, and it makes it quite, in a way, sort of slightly obscene, and that adds to the whole thing of it, the whole tension of the work. So,
And there's the further question of, once it's in bronze, it can go outside.
Yeah.
It's a great cry in sculpture, where are we going to put it? Will it go outside?
yeah,
Well, I wouldn't spend that much money on anything to leave it outside. I don't want my work ever to have to compete with outside.
I love putting stuff outside.
You do it incredibly successfully.
Oh, thank you very
She
much.
works
Oh, I'm getting lots of
scale very
praise
well.
tonight.
You get scale very well, and understanding scale.
Well,
is
I
the
don't
key
really
to
try and
outside.
compete as well.
Exactly.
So, you know, they
I try and
exist
compete,
in,
disaster.
yeah.
There's-
Yeah, they exist in real space. There's a few I've made that's slightly bigger, but yeah.
but your work in the rain outside is very, very different to other sculpture in the rain. Like, for instance, if I was to see this in a park,
In the rain.
in the rain,
Yes.
it would be, well, it would also feel very, very much more, in my mind, like a real a struggle that is even harder, right? That they are through certain elements. I'm taking this now to
Yeah,
right? But like, and maybe if bronze can do that, is that an element that's, because I've seen, you know, the badger
Yeah,
in the rain,
yeah.
and I feel very sorry for him.
Yeah, they look much
more
more
than him in
miserable.
the sunshine going through
Yeah.
the bin. You know,
Yeah.
he's really effing cold.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. No, it can.
Amazing. So everything for now. Should we have another glass of wine and some chit chat?
Yeah, lovely.
Laura, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really, really appreciate that.